This is the Buffett Mindset channel where we practice patience and calm wealth building daily. If you enjoy these types of videos, consider liking and subscribing. This will mean a lot to the channel. What if you said, I command my day, I command my body, I command my mind, because discipline is no longer something I try to learn, it is who I am. Do you see the difference? One man prays for motivation, the other man programs identity. One man waits for inspiration, the other man repeats instruction, and the subconscious does not reward hope, it rewards certainty. So if you want to break free from the story of laziness, stop fighting it like an enemy and start rewriting it like a script. This is why I tell you that ambitious men who feel lazy are not broken, they are misaligned. They have not yet learned that the body obeys the mind and the mind obeys repetition, and repetition must be deliberate, must be emotional, must be definite. This is the first law of your rewire. Change your story and repeat it until even your weakest days bow to it. Say it aloud now. I am disciplined. I am consistent. I do not wait for the mood to move. I move and the mood follows. Say it again until your tongue is weary, because it is the tongue that steers the subconscious like reins steer a horse. Every man you admire who has built something lasting has mastered this simple truth. They do not argue with their laziness, they out-train it. Edison did not ask for feelings of motivation to arrive. He lit his lamps, sat at his desk, and worked until his vision took form. Ford did not wonder if he was the type of man who deserved to build an empire. He became that man by training his hours, by repeating his vision, by refusing to drift. Carnegie did not rise because opportunity knocked gently. He rose because he built habits of movement even when exhausted, even when mocked, even when unseen. Discipline is not divine luck, it is divine repetition. The lazy man prays for the perfect time, the sovereign man builds perfect rhythm. The lazy man waits for clarity, the sovereign man moves, and clarity is revealed on the trail. And if you would break free from the weight that holds you, you must join the sovereigns. Do not ask, am I lazy? Ask, what story do I repeat before bed? What words do I rehearse at dawn? What identity do I declare when no one is watching? For that is what the subconscious obeys, and that is what becomes destiny. The cure is not complicated, it is simple, but it is costly, for it demands you repeat what you want until your body bows to it, until your hesitation is drowned, until your actions align without question. And I tell you plainly, if you repeat this new story for 7 days without fail, you will already feel the chains break. 14 days, and others will notice you are different. 30 days, and your subconscious will no longer fight you but serve you. 90 days, and you will no longer recognize the man you used to call lazy. For discipline is not a mountain you climb once. It is a road you walk daily until the road becomes you. And when it does, you will not ask for energy, for clarity, for motivation. You will rise with them built into your bones. You will move with decision even when storms gather. You will act like the man you were always meant to be, not because luck touched you, but because you rewrote the script and repeated it until law obeyed. The second law of your rewire is ritual, because discipline is never built on accident. It is hammered into place with rhythm, like a blacksmith shaping steel. Laziness survives in gaps, in vague mornings, in drifting evenings where nothing is fixed and everything is optional. But when a man sets ritual, when he binds his day with non-negotiables, the fog clears and the drift dies. Think of Buffett, who has lived decade after decade in near identical rhythm, reading, studying, thinking, while the world chases novelty and distraction. It is not excitement that made him sovereign, it is ritual. Think of Ford, whose assembly line was nothing but ritual perfected, one motion repeated until it created an empire. Ritual is not glamorous, but it is law. The drifter sleeps until he feels like rising, eats whatever mood commands, works whenever the urge strikes, and wonders why years slip away. The sovereign rises on schedule, speaks his affirmations before his first sip of water, sets his body to motion whether or not his mind resists, because he knows the mind will soon follow the body. He places anchors in his day, morning, midday, night, and these anchors keep him from drifting even when storms rage. Do not think ritual is prison, ritual is freedom. The man without it is a slave to emotion, a slave to distraction, a slave to whatever suggestion comes. The man with ritual is free because his hours serve him, his energy obeys him, his days align with his destiny. Say it aloud now, my rituals build my freedom. Repeat it until the very idea of drifting becomes foreign. If you feel lazy, do not pray for motivation, design ritual. Choose 3 daily actions that move you toward your aim and bind them to fixed times. Repeat them for 7 days, then 14, then 30, until they feel as natural as breath. At first, your body will resist. Your old story will whisper, "You've never lasted before," but ignore it. Keep the ritual, for law does not bow to feelings, law bows to repetition. And here is the deeper truth. Ritual rewires identity faster than desire ever could. A man who says, "I want to be disciplined," may drift for years, but the man who performs disciplined actions daily will soon believe he is disciplined, because the subconscious does not argue with what you repeat. It records, it obeys, it builds. So start where you are. Do not wait for grand visions or complex plans. Begin with one morning ritual, one work ritual, one evening ritual. Protect them like a farmer protects seed from birds, for these rituals are the seed of the man you are becoming. And as they take root, laziness will vanish not because you fought it, but because you replaced it. The old story will wither, the new identity will bloom, and you will discover that the man you thought was lazy was only waiting for the structure that law demands. The third law of your rewire is environment, for no man can remain disciplined if he surrounds himself with the architecture of drift. Laziness is not simply born in the mind, it is reinforced by the places you inhabit, the people you tolerate, the noise you permit. A drifter lives in clutter, in chaos, in endless distraction, and he wonders why his mind feels heavy. He sits among doubters, scrollers, complainers, and he wonders why his energy collapses. He feeds on the constant stream of shallow entertainment, mindless chatter, endless comparison, and he wonders why his ambition fades to a whisper. The sovereign understands that his environment is either fertilizer or poison. He shapes his room, his desk, his routines to echo his purpose. His books reflect his mission. His walls remind him of his vision. His tools are ready, sharpened, placed where they demand use. He does not permit chaos, for chaos breeds drift. Consider Carnegie, who built his libraries not only for the world but for himself, because he knew that the mind is sharpened by the environment of words, of knowledge, of order. Consider Edison, who constructed Menlo Park to be a factory of invention, every corner humming with energy, every wall reminding him and his men of the vision they pursued. Consider Buffett, who spends his life in Omaha, far from the noise of Wall Street, because he knows that clarity is preserved in silence and isolation from the crowd. You may think environment is a small thing, but it is law, for the subconscious mind takes every signal it receives and molds you to it. A messy room repeats the story of a messy life, a chaotic desk repeats the story of chaotic thought, a distracted feed repeats the story of a distracted destiny. If you want to stop feeling lazy, build an environment that makes laziness impossible. Remove the clutter that whispers hesitation. Remove the friends who mock discipline. Remove the inputs that keep you scrolling instead of building. Replace them with order, with vision, with symbols of the man you are becoming. Surround yourself with builders, with believers, with men who move even when tired. Place reminders where your eyes fall daily, a statement of purpose on your wall, a verse that commands your thought, a schedule that governs your time. Say it aloud, "My environment serves my purpose." Repeat it until you feel uneasy in places of drift, until your very body resists the company of drifters, until your spirit demands order where it once tolerated chaos. Laziness is not who you are, it is what you've been rehearsing by the stage you've built around yourself. Change the stage and the actor changes. Rewrite the environment and the performance transforms. Align your surroundings with your sovereign aim, and soon your days will follow as naturally as water runs downhill. For the mind obeys what it sees, what it hears, what it touches, and if you take command of those inputs, you take command of your identity. The fourth law of your rewire is decision and momentum, for nothing destroys laziness faster than a man who refuses to delay choice and who builds the habit of moving without hesitation. Laziness thrives in indecision. It festers in the endless pause between thought and action. A drifter spends hours weighing options, questioning himself, seeking permission from the world, until the window of opportunity closes and he sighs, calling it bad luck. But it was not luck that left him empty, it was the absence of decision. Understand this: every time you delay, you strengthen the identity of hesitation. Every time you decide quickly and act, you reinforce the identity of discipline. Buffett once said that success comes from saying no to almost everything, but when the right opportunity appeared, his yes was immediate, absolute, and without wavering. Ford decided to build an automobile for the common man, and though the world mocked him, he never reversed that decision. Edison decided that the light would burn, and though he failed 10,000 times, he never surrendered that decision. Decision is not about comfort, it is about alignment. The sovereign knows that once a choice is made, his energy is no longer divided, his subconscious is given a command, and his body begins to obey it. But decision alone is not enough. It must be followed by momentum, For a man who decides but does not move is like a rider who saddles his horse but never takes the reins. The horse grows restless, the trail grows colder, and the chance is lost. Momentum is built not by great leaps, but by immediate steps. A drifter waits to feel ready before taking the first step, and so he never begins. A sovereign moves first and lets readiness catch up. He builds the habit of taking one small step within seconds of his decision, and that step ignites the fire of momentum. Say it aloud: I decide quickly. I move immediately. I build momentum daily. Repeat it until hesitation feels unnatural, until delay feels like betrayal, until every fiber of your being associates movement with identity. For laziness is nothing more than hesitation, repeated until it becomes a rhythm. Decision and momentum are the antidotes, the new rhythm that reprograms the subconscious. Begin now. Choose one action, any action, and do it. Do not wait for a perfect plan, for the world to applaud, or for fear to vanish. Move, then move again, and soon you will find that the weight of laziness dissolves, for the body in motion commands the mind, and the mind in decision commands destiny. The fifth law of your rewire is identity installation. For no habit, no ritual, no decision will endure unless it is anchored in who you believe yourself to be. A man may force discipline for a week, for a month, even for a season. But if deep inside he still repeats the story, I am lazy, the subconscious will drag him back to drift. Identity is the governor of behavior. It is the root from which all action flows. And so the sovereign knows that to end laziness, he must no longer wrestle with behavior alone. He must uproot the false identity and plant a new one. How is this done? Through repetition with emotion, through words spoken daily, through pictures rehearsed in the mind until they harden into certainty. The drifter says, I hope to be disciplined. The sovereign says, I am disciplined. The drifter whispers, maybe one day I'll be consistent. The sovereign declares, I never miss, I return daily, I finish what I begin. And though at first these words feel like lies, the subconscious does not judge, it does not question. It only records what is repeated with feeling, and soon it begins to build behavior to match. This is why I tell you, stop confessing laziness. Stop rehearsing weakness. Stop introducing yourself to yourself as a man who quits. Begin speaking identity before it is visible, and the law will bend reality to match it. Carnegie did not see himself as a poor bobbin boy, though he was one. He saw himself as a builder, and his subconscious molded him to it. Ford did not see himself as a farmer's son alone. He saw himself as an industrialist, and the law shaped his steps to fulfill it. Edison did not see himself as a failure after 10,000 attempts. He saw himself as the man who would light the world, and the law obeyed his belief. Identity shapes destiny. Say it aloud now. I am a man of discipline. I am a man of consistency. I do not wait for the mood to move. I move and the mood follows. Repeat it until your voice no longer trembles. Repeat it until your posture shifts, until your eyes sharpen, until others feel the weight of your certainty before you speak. Identity is not found, it is forged. And the man who forges the identity of discipline cannot remain lazy, for every action of his day will begin to bow to the story he repeats. Let the old identity die. Bury it with silence. Feed only the new one. Water it with repetition. Guard it with ritual. Protect it with environment, and soon it will grow into the sovereign self you always knew was waiting within.
The sixth law of your rewire is emotional leverage, for reason alone is too weak to overthrow years of drift. A man may know he should rise early, that he should work on his craft, that he should save and invest, but knowing is a frail rope when desire to sleep, scroll, or surrender tugs harder. Logic whispers, but emotion commands. And so the sovereign learns to harness his deepest pains and highest desires, turning them into fire that laziness cannot withstand. Think on this. The drifter avoids pain, numbs it, hides it, explains it away, and so his laziness lives unchallenged. The sovereign takes the same pain, the regret of wasted years, the memory of missed chances, the sting of mediocrity, and holds it before his eyes until it burns, until it is unbearable, until it becomes a weapon against drift. He says, never again, and means it. And when the old story of laziness tempts him, he recalls that pain and moves, not because he feels like it, but because he refuses to return to chains he has tasted. This is emotional leverage. It is also found in vision, the joy of seeing your family free, the peace of commanding your time, the pride of building what men said was impossible. These emotions are not distractions, they are fuel. Carnegie walked through poverty as a child, and that memory of hunger pushed him to build wealth that outlived him. Lincoln bore the pain of repeated failure and loss, but instead of surrendering, he used it to forge resilience strong enough to hold a divided nation together. Rockefeller was driven by a clear picture of control and order, and his empire reflected that vision.
None of these men relied only on thought. They tied their thought to emotion, and that emotion gave their discipline the force of destiny. Say it aloud: my pain is fuel, my vision is fire. I turn emotion into discipline. Repeat this until even the memory of wasted time becomes unbearable, until your future vision pulls you like gravity. For laziness cannot stand before a man whose heart is aflame. It wilts in the presence of passion. It flees from the man who has chained his discipline to something bigger than comfort. Do not waste your emotions in idle entertainment, shallow chatter, or secret doubt. Harness them. Bind them to your rituals. Let them roar in your repetitions. And soon you will discover that what once felt like laziness was only the absence of emotional fire. With fire, even the heaviest load becomes light. Even the dullest day shines with meaning. Even the hardest task becomes movement toward destiny. The seventh law of your rewire is accountability. For no man rises to greatness alone, and no man remains disciplined without being bound to his word before others. Laziness thrives in secrecy. It hides in the shadows of isolation, whispering, "No one will know if you skip today. No one will notice if you break the pattern. No one will see if you drift." And in that darkness, the drifter grows weaker by the day. But the sovereign shines light on his path. He binds himself to a higher standard, to a brotherhood, to a mentor, to his own children, to a cause greater than himself. He speaks his commitments aloud, not for applause, but for accountability. When Carnegie sought to build his empire, he did not hide his ambition. He declared it before men of influence, so that his word forced him forward. When Ford promised the world an automobile for the common man, he could not retreat without shame, and so his word became his master. When Edison claimed he would find the light, every failure was measured against that declaration, and each attempt carried the weight of a public vow. Accountability is not weakness, it is law. The subconscious obeys the strongest voices in your life. If those voices are silent, lazy, and permissive, your discipline will dissolve. But if those voices are firm, demanding, expectant, then your discipline will grow teeth. This is why you must choose your circle with care. The drifter surrounds himself with men who excuse weakness, who laugh at effort, who mock ambition. The sovereign surrounds himself with men who demand his best, who mirror his purpose, who sharpen him like iron sharpens iron. Say it aloud: I am bound to my word. My circle holds me to my standard. I do not drift alone. I rise with discipline enforced. Repeat it until you feel the weight of accountability whenever you are tempted to slip, until you cannot bear the thought of dishonoring your name before those you respect. For accountability transforms laziness into action, hesitation into courage, drift into decision. Write your commitments down, speak them aloud, bind them to men who will not let you drift. Tie them to your children's future, to your family freedom, to your legacy's survival. For the man who is accountable cannot remain lazy, because every skipped day is no longer hidden, it is exposed, it is measured, it is unacceptable. And in that fire, discipline is forged. The eighth law of your rewire is mastery of time, for laziness is not truly the absence of energy, but the misuse of hours. Every man receives the same 24, yet some build empires while others build excuses. The drifter treats time as though it is endless. He scrolls, he drifts, he delays, believing that tomorrow will give him what today has wasted. But the sovereign knows that each hour is currency, each moment a seed, and that time once spent cannot be returned. He bends hours to his service by order, by schedule, by ruthless clarity of aim. Buffett reads for hours daily, not because he is idle, but because he has mastered time. He knows that 1 hour invested in thought yields 10 years of return. Ford built his factories on time mastery, every motion measured, every delay removed, until cars rolled out not in weeks, but in hours. Edison worked through nights not because he worshipped fatigue, but because he understood the sacred weight of a single hour when captured by purpose. And so I tell you, the cure for laziness is not more energy, but more respect for time. A man who reveres his hours cannot waste them. A man who treats them as sacred currency cannot drift. Begin by commanding your morning, for how you spend your first hour governs your entire day. Do not surrender it to distraction or noise. Guard it with ritual, fill it with purpose, demand that it serves your aim. Then command your evenings, for the final hour before sleep is when the subconscious is most open, and whatever thought you plant there will grow overnight. Finally, command your midday, for that is when drift whispers strongest, when fatigue tempts you to surrender. Prepare for it with structure, with small victories, with deliberate renewal. Say it aloud. My time is my servant. I spend it with precision. I waste nothing. Repeat it until you feel the sting whenever minutes are lost, until you rise from distractions as though from fire, until your hours march in rhythm to your will. The drifter dies with regret because his time slips silently through his fingers. The sovereign dies fulfilled because he bent every hour to his mission. Which will you be? Your answer is not written in your dreams but in your calendar. Command your hours, and laziness will have no soil left to grow in. The ninth law of your rewire is mastery of body and energy, for the mind may command, but the body is the horse upon which the spirit rides. A weak horse cannot carry a strong rider. Laziness often disguises itself as fatigue, as heaviness, as sluggishness of the flesh, when in truth it is the consequence of neglect. The drifter fuels his body with poison, with shallow sleep, with endless stimulants, with no respect for the vessel that carries his destiny. He wonders why he lacks fire, why his vision fades, why his discipline collapses at the first sign of weariness. But the sovereign understands that discipline is not only mental law, it is physical law. He feeds his body clean fuel because he knows the subconscious obeys signals of vitality. He rests with intention, rising early not by accident but by rhythm. He strengthens his frame, for strength of body echoes into strength of spirit. Consider Rockefeller, who despite his empire walked daily with deliberate pace, commanding both mind and body into order. Consider Ford, who insisted on efficiency not only in machines but in men, knowing that wasted energy was wasted life. Consider Buffett, who though not a soldier of iron, mastered his routines and his diet of thought and simplicity, proving that energy is sustained by rhythm and clarity, not excess. Laziness is not natural to man, mismanagement of energy is. And so I tell you, guard your body as you guard your mind. Move daily, not for vanity but for vitality. Feed with order, not indulgence. Sleep with rhythm, not drift. Say it aloud, my body serves my mission, my energy is sacred fuel, I rise with strength, I move with fire. Repeat it until you cannot tolerate the fog of indulgence, until you feel the dishonor of wasted strength, until your very cells obey the rhythm of discipline. For the sovereign who masters his body gains a double advantage. His mind sharpens like steel, and his will endures like stone. Laziness flees before such a man because his flesh no longer betrays his spirit. He is unified, aligned, whole, and the world bows to wholeness. The 10th law of your rewire is the law of focus, for laziness is rarely the absence of ambition but the scattering of it. A man who tries to chase 10 hares catches none, and then he calls himself lazy when in truth he was only unfocused. The drifter lives in fragments, a little work here, a little dreaming there, a little start on this, a little distraction on that, until the day ends with nothing built. He mistakes busyness for productivity, confusion for effort, drift for rest. But the sovereign is ruthless in narrowing his aim. He knows that energy divided is power wasted. He chooses one definite chief aim, as Carnegie commanded me to teach, and he bends every thought, every word, every act to that singular line. He does not despise small opportunities, but he measures them against his one great purpose. If they align, he seizes them. If they distract, he rejects them. And this rejection is what weak men call laziness, but in truth it is power. Think of Buffett, who rejects 99 deals to accept one, who calls his ability to say no the very foundation of his wealth. Think of Ford, who did not scatter himself across dozens of industries, but built his rhythm around one machine, one vision, one empire. Think of Edison, who bent all of his energy into light, into invention, into the shaping of a new age, though men mocked him for his obsession. Focus is not merely concentration, it is consecration. It is the setting apart of mind and spirit for one purpose, until all else fades to silence. Say it aloud, I reject distraction. I bend my will to one aim. I am focused, and my focus is law. Repeat it until every triviality offends you, until every shallow distraction feels like theft, until your soul burns with the joy of singularity. For the man who focuses becomes unstoppable. Laziness cannot survive in him, because his energy is no longer scattered into fragments of indecision. It is forged into a spear, sharp, precise, piercing the world with his aim. The drifter dies surrounded by fragments of unfinished dreams. The sovereign dies surrounded by monuments to his focus. Choose which you will be. And remember, greatness is not built by men who start many things, it is built by men who finish the one thing that mattered most. The 11th law of your rewire is the law of environment, for no man can outlast the constant pull of the world around him. The drifter fills his days with noise, with clutter, with companions who excuse his weakness, with rooms that whisper distraction, with habits that anchor him to the old self. He calls it laziness, but in truth it is gravity. A man cannot rise if his environment chains him to the ground. The sovereign knows this. He does not rely only on willpower, for he knows willpower is a candle that burns out under a storm of temptation. Instead, he engineers his environment to serve his aim. His desk is clean, his tools are ready, his circle is sharpened. He removes the poison of endless entertainment from his reach. He silences the constant tug of shallow voices. He fills his space with triggers of discipline, books that feed him, reminders that focus him, rituals that command him forward. When Carnegie built his empire, he built more than factories, he built an environment of progress, where every man moved in rhythm toward the same end. When Ford designed his assembly lines, he was not only building cars but creating an atmosphere where drift was impossible, where every motion pushed the mission forward. When Rockefeller shaped his offices, he built not luxury but order, so that even the walls whispered efficiency. Your environment is your silent mentor. It trains you even when you are not aware.
And so I tell you, if laziness haunts you, look first not at your heart but at your surroundings. Who speaks into your ears daily? What images fill your eyes? What clutter weighs down your body? What poisons sit within arm reach? Change these and you will find laziness dissolving not because your will grew, but because your chains broke. Say it aloud. My environment serves my destiny. I cut away all that weakens me. I fill my space with power. Repeat it until you cannot tolerate the fog of indulgence, until you feel the dishonor of wasted strength, until your very cells obey the rhythm of discipline. For the sovereign who masters his body gains a double advantage. His mind sharpens like steel, and his will endures like stone. Laziness flees before such a man because his flesh no longer betrays his spirit. He is unified, aligned, whole, and the world bows to wholeness. The 10th law of your rewire is the law of focus, for laziness is rarely the absence of ambition but the scattering of it. A man who tries to chase 10 hares catches none, and then he calls himself lazy when in truth he was only unfocused. The drifter lives in fragments, a little work here, a little dreaming there, a little start on this, a little distraction on that, until the day ends with nothing built. He mistakes busyness for productivity, confusion for effort, drift for rest. But the sovereign is ruthless in narrowing his aim. He knows that energy divided is power wasted. He chooses one definite chief aim, as Carnegie commanded me to teach, and he bends every thought, every word, every act to that singular line. He does not despise small opportunities, but he measures them against his one great purpose. If they align, he seizes them. If they distract, he rejects them. And this rejection is what weak men call laziness, but in truth it is power. Think of Buffett, who rejects 99 deals to accept one, who calls his ability to say no the very foundation of his wealth. Think of Ford, who did not scatter himself across dozens of industries but built his rhythm around one machine, one vision, one empire. Think of Edison, who bent all of his energy into light, into invention, into the shaping of a new age, though men mocked him for his obsession. Focus is not merely concentration, it is consecration. It is the setting apart of mind and spirit for one purpose, until all else fades to... The 12th law of your rewire is the law of repetition and rhythm. For transformation does not come by single bursts of effort, but by the steady hammer of daily return. Laziness thrives on irregularity. It survives when men act only when they feel like it, when they wait for inspiration, when they burn bright one day and vanish the next. The drifter believes progress is built in sudden waves, in flashes of excitement, in emotional highs that fade as quickly as they come. And so his life is a cycle of false starts and abandoned efforts. But the sovereign understands that greatness is the offspring of rhythm. He knows that the subconscious does not respond to occasional effort, but to repeated suggestion. He knows that every act done daily, no matter how small, carves grooves into the mind until it becomes automatic. Repetition is the sculptor of identity. Carnegie did not become a titan of industry by a single brilliant deal, but by decades of consistent building. Buffett did not become a master of wealth by one clever investment, but by the rhythm of daily study, daily thought, daily patience. Edison did not invent the light because of a single experiment, but because he returned again and again, 10,000 times, each attempt another chisel against the stone of impossibility. Rhythm is what the drifter avoids and what the sovereign embraces. Laziness cannot survive in rhythm, for when the body and mind are trained to act daily, action becomes nature and hesitation is starved. Say it aloud. I return daily. My rhythm is law. My repetition is identity. Repeat it until your actions become instinct, until missing a day feels unnatural, until discipline is not something you strive for, but something you are. For the truth is this: success is not extraordinary. It is ordinary action done with extraordinary consistency. The drifter will call it boring. He will chase novelty, excitement, constant change, and in doing so, he will remain enslaved. The sovereign calls it sacred. He bows to the same rituals, the same repetitions, until the world itself bows to his rhythm. Remember this: the world does not reward the man who starts, it rewards the man who returns. The 13th law of your rewire is the law of sacrifice, for no man can build the life he desires while clinging to the life that keeps him weak. Laziness often survives not because men lack vision, but because they refuse to release the comforts that rot their discipline. The drifter wants freedom without surrender, greatness without cost, power without price. He clings to late nights of indulgence, to friendships that excuse mediocrity, to entertainments that numb his mind, to habits that rob his fire. He wonders why he cannot move forward, yet his hands are full of chains he refuses to drop. But the sovereign knows this eternal law: every rise requires release. To take hold of destiny, you must let go of drift. To seize new identity, you must bury the old. Rockefeller did not become the richest man of his age by chasing every fleeting pleasure. He sacrificed distraction for discipline, indulgence for focus. Ford did not build his empire by living as his neighbors lived. He sacrificed conformity for vision, comfort for creation. Buffett did not compound billions by scattering his attention. He sacrificed the thrill of constant deals for the power of patience and precision. Sacrifice is not punishment, it is purification. It is the fire that burns away what weakens you so that only strength remains. Say it aloud: I release what chains me. I sacrifice comfort for purpose. I burn away distraction and rise in discipline. Repeat it until every indulgence feels like theft, until every wasted hour stings your conscience, until every weakness you once excused feels like betrayal. For the truth is this: you cannot keep both drift and destiny. You must choose. The drifter tries to cling to both, and so he loses all. The sovereign sacrifices one and gains everything. Do not mistake this. Sacrifice is not optional, it is law. And if you do not sacrifice for what you want will be the sacrifice. The man who refuses to give up his weakness will watch his strength wither, but the man who cuts away what weakens him will stand unshaken, for discipline fills the space where indulgence once lived, and in that strength, laziness has no ground to grow. The 14th law of your rewire is the law of vision, for no man can rise higher than the picture he holds of himself. Laziness often disguises itself as confusion, as wandering, as lack of clarity. A man says, I don't know what to do, and so he does nothing. But the truth is simpler: he does not lack ability, he lacks a vision that burns. The drifter wakes each day with no image of tomorrow, so he drifts back into yesterday. He knows he wants success, but cannot see it clearly enough to walk toward it. He admires greatness in others, but cannot imagine it in himself, and so his actions collapse under the weight of uncertainty. But the sovereign carries a vision so sharp, so detailed, so personal, that it calls him forward even when he is tired, even when he is doubted, even when he is tempted to quit. Carnegie saw beyond the mill floor and pictured an empire of steel shaping nations. Ford looked beyond the farm and saw a machine that would change the world. Edison looked beyond the darkness and saw a city lit by his invention. Buffett looked beyond the noise of markets and saw decades of compounding wealth, while others chased quick gain. Vision is not daydream, it is blueprint. It is not fantasy, it is architecture, and every man must draw his own. Say it aloud: I see myself as the man I am becoming. My vision is clear, my picture is law. Repeat it until the image of your future self feels more real than the reflection in your mirror. Write it in detail, not vague wishes, but sharp scenes. What you do, how you walk, where you live, how you give, who you are. Hold it daily, for the subconscious moves not toward generalities, but toward specifics. A clear vision cuts through laziness because it creates inevitability. Each action is no longer random, but measured against the picture. Each temptation is no longer harmless, but judged as betrayal.
Each hour is no longer wasted, but invested in a future already seen. The drifter calls vision a dream. The sovereign calls vision destiny in seed form. And when he waters it with repetition and belief, the world itself bends to bring it forth. Remember this, no man stumbles into greatness. He builds it first in vision, then in discipline, then in reality. And laziness dissolves in the presence of a future so vivid that doing nothing feels like death. The 15th law of your rewire is the law of faith and persistence. For vision without belief collapses, and belief without endurance fades. Laziness thrives where faith is absent. When a man doubts himself, he waits. When he questions the worth of his mission, he delays. When he wavers at the first sign of resistance, he retreats. He calls it laziness, but it is disbelief in disguise. The drifter tells himself he will move when he feels certain, when conditions are perfect, when results come quickly. But certainty never arrives. Conditions are never perfect. Results are never instant. And so he drifts into years of hesitation. The sovereign understands that faith is not a feeling, but a discipline. He speaks belief before he feels it. He acts on conviction before proof appears. He declares himself capable before the world agrees. He repeats faith until it is carved into his very marrow, and he persists until the world bends. Consider Edison, who faced 10,000 failures yet persisted because his faith in the vision was greater than the weight of delay. Consider Lincoln, who endured defeat after defeat, ridicule after ridicule, yet persisted in faith that his mission was not to be denied. Consider Buffett, who sat in patience while others panicked, whose faith in compounding carried him through decades where quick riches tempted every hand but his own. Persistence is faith applied over time. It is belief stretched across storms. It is conviction that refuses to bend. Say it aloud. My faith is law. My persistence is unbreakable. I act without permission. I endure without retreat. Repeat it until doubt feels foreign, until quitting feels impossible, until your very identity burns with endurance. Laziness cannot coexist with persistence, for when a man decides to move every day regardless of feeling, regardless of result, he breaks the spine of hesitation. And once that spine is broken, he cannot drift again. The drifter lives by mood. The sovereign lives by faith. The drifter waits for signs. The sovereign creates them. The drifter quits when tired. The sovereign persists until victory. And here lies the eternal law. The world does not resist the man who persists with faith. It may delay him. It may test him. It may wound him. But in the end, it must yield. For faith and persistence are the twin hammers that shape destiny, and no force of laziness, no storm of doubt, no whisper of fear can stand against them. The 16th law of your rewire is the law of accountability, for even the strongest vision and the fiercest persistence can be dulled if a man answers only to himself. Laziness flourishes in isolation. When no one sees, the drifter makes excuses. When no one expects, he delays. When no one holds him to standard, he lowers it until it vanishes. He tells himself he will do better tomorrow, but tomorrow never comes. The sovereign knows that accountability is a force as sharp as fire. He binds himself to standards higher than comfort, and he accepts the eyes of others, whether visible or invisible, as guardians of his discipline. Andrew Carnegie surrounded himself with men of industry who demanded results. Henry Ford aligned himself with teams who carried the same vision. Rockefeller built structures that left no room for drift. Even Buffett, though solitary in nature, built accountability into his life through letters, through promises to partners, through principles he could not betray without betraying himself. Accountability does not weaken freedom, it secures it. For the man who is not bound to a higher law will always be enslaved by lower appetites. Say it aloud. I am accountable to my mission. I bind myself to higher law. I will not betray the man I am becoming. Repeat it until excuses sting, until broken promises feel like fire in your chest, until discipline becomes as sacred as breath. Understand this, accountability is not merely external, it is also internal. It is the awareness that every action you take is witnessed by your future self, by your family, by the generations that will inherit your results. When you delay, you teach your children delay. When you drift, you pass drift into your lineage. But when you rise, when you execute, when you hold the line, you carve strength into the bloodline itself. The drifter lives as if no one is watching. The sovereign lives as if eternity watches every move. And in truth, it does. Every choice is recorded, every pattern repeated, every law either obeyed or broken. Laziness cannot survive under the weight of accountability because accountability multiplies the cost of drift. And once a man feels that cost, he will never again waste his hours cheaply. The 17th law of your rewire is the law of momentum. For the hardest step is always the first, but once motion begins, it multiplies itself until even the smallest effort becomes unstoppable force. Laziness feeds on stillness. It grows strongest in the gap before action, in the hesitation before the first movement. The drifter says, "I'll begin tomorrow," and tomorrow becomes a month, a year, a lifetime. He waits to feel ready, and readiness never arrives. But the sovereign understands that momentum is built not in leaps, but in steady strides. One action leads to another, and discipline compounds as surely as money does under interest. Carnegie began with pennies, but compounded them into fortunes. Buffett began with small investments, but compounded them into empires. Edison began with one experiment, but compounded it into thousands until the world lit with his persistence. Momentum makes ordinary effort extraordinary because it adds the weight of yesterday to today action. Say it aloud. I begin now. I build momentum daily. My action compounds into destiny. Repeat it until hesitation feels unnatural, until delay feels like betrayal, until every step you take fuels the next. Understand this, the first act of discipline is always the smallest. It may be rising when tired, working when uninspired, creating when no one watches, but when repeated, it forms rhythm. Rhythm becomes momentum. Momentum becomes mastery. Laziness cannot exist in momentum because motion starves hesitation. Once the wheel is turning, every push is easier, every act is lighter, every day feels guided by force greater than yourself. The drifter lives in the curse of starting over, forever trapped at the first step. The sovereign lives in the blessing of compounding, carried forward by the strength of his own rhythm. Momentum is proof that success is not given, but earned, not in grand gestures, but in daily returns. And once momentum belongs to you, the world itself must bend, for nothing can stop a man who refuses to stop himself. The 18th law of your rewire is the law of focus, for energy scattered is energy wasted, and laziness thrives wherever attention is divided. The drifter burns with ambition but scatters it across too many aims. He starts 10 fires but tends none. He fills his days with busyness but produces no progress. He convinces himself he is working, yet his mind jumps from one distraction to another until fatigue overtakes him and he calls it laziness. But the sovereign knows that focus is the furnace of power. He understands that a single aim pursued with clarity will burn hotter than 100 vague desires. Rockefeller did not build his empire by dabbling in every trade. He focused on oil until the world bent to his monopoly. Buffett did not become one of the richest men alive by chasing every opportunity. He focused on businesses he understood and compounded focus into billions. Ford did not revolutionize industry by tinkering with every invention. He focused on the automobile and moved the world on wheels. Say it aloud. My energy is sacred. My focus is fire. I burn only toward my definite aim. Repeat it until distractions feel like theft, until scattered ambition feels like betrayal, until every act that does not serve your purpose feels foreign. For the truth is this, laziness is not always lack of effort. Sometimes it is the byproduct of divided effort. The drifter grows weary not because he works hard, but because he works without direction, pouring himself into wells that never fill. The sovereign grows stronger because every drop of effort falls into the same reservoir and soon it overflows into abundance. Understand this, your mind cannot serve two masters. If you tell it to chase riches and comfort, it will betray both. If you tell it to chase 100 goals, it will stumble after none. But if you give it one definite aim, repeat it daily, and burn all distraction upon the altar of focus, your subconscious will bend every faculty, every thought, every action toward its realization. Laziness cannot survive in the light of such focus, for the mind that knows exactly where it is going will not waste time wandering. The drifter calls focus obsession, the sovereign calls it law, and the world in the end calls it greatness. The 19th law of your rewire is the law of environment, for no man becomes sovereign while dwelling among those who praise weakness, excuse delay, and worship mediocrity. Laziness is not always born within, often it is nurtured by the soil you stand in. The drifter surrounds himself with drifters. His friends waste hours, so he wastes hours. His companions mock ambition, so he hides his. His circle values ease over excellence, so his discipline withers. He tells himself he is lazy, but the truth is harsher. He is contaminated. The sovereign knows that environment is not neutral. Every word spoken to you, every habit around you, every atmosphere you inhale becomes a seed in your mind. and seeds, when repeated, grow roots. This is why Carnegie sought the company of builders, why Edison aligned with inventors, why Ford surrounded himself with men of mechanics and vision. Even Buffett admits he chooses associates who are better than himself, for their standards lift his own. Say it aloud. I choose my environment with wisdom. I surround myself with strength. I rise with those who rise. Repeat it until weak company feels like poison, until idle places feel like death, until mediocrity feels like betrayal. Understand this: you are not stronger than your environment, you are shaped by it. The drifter clings to old companions, claiming loyalty, yet loyalty to weakness is treason to destiny. The sovereign severs ties when they chain him to smallness. He builds new circles, not of comfort, but of challenge. He walks into rooms where he is the least, so that he may grow into more. He removes the distractions of his dwelling, replaces them with reminders of his aim, burns away the habits that invite drift. For law is clear: a man becomes his environment as surely as a tree bends with the wind. And laziness, though it feels personal, is often environmental disease. Change the soil and the roots grow differently. Change the circle and the mind awakens. Change the atmosphere and discipline breathes. The drifter resists this law, clinging to old places and old voices. The sovereign obeys it, and by doing so multiplies his rise. The 20th law of your rewire is the law of standards. For a man never rises above the minimum he demands of himself. Laziness hides in low standards. The drifter does just enough to get by. He works only to avoid punishment, not to secure greatness. He accepts excuses as if they were reasons, and he permits mediocrity in his habits because mediocrity is the standard of the crowd. He tells himself he is lazy, but the truth is that his standard is too low to awaken his fire. A weak aim produces weak effort. The sovereign, however, raises his standards until laziness cannot survive in them. He refuses to tolerate excuses, even his own. He rejects the comfort of minimum effort. He lifts the floor of his life so high that even his bad days produce results that others would call excellence. Say it aloud. My standards are sacred. I rise to meet them daily. I demand more of myself than the world demands of me. Repeat it until compromise feels like poison, until excuses sting like fire, until even the thought of lowering your bar feels like betrayal. Consider Rockefeller. He did not accept the chaos of the oil industry. He demanded order, control, and structure, and by raising the standard, he built an empire. Consider Ford. He did not accept the slow pace of production. He demanded speed, efficiency, and accessibility, and the world bowed to his raised bar. Consider Buffett. He does not accept average returns. He demands investments that meet his precise criteria, and he refuses anything less. Their greatness was not accident. It was the result of standards so high that laziness could not breathe near them. Understand this: the standard you set is the floor your life will stand on. Set it low, and you will crawl. Set it high, and you will rise, whether you feel like it or not. The drifter waits for discipline to appear. The sovereign installs discipline by setting standards that make laziness unbearable. And once those standards are written into identity, every act, every decision, every word bends to meet them. This is the law: life does not give you what you wish for, it gives you what you demand. The 21st law of your rewire is the law of identity, for no man can act consistently in a manner that contradicts the story he tells himself. Laziness is not a permanent condition, it is a narrative repeated until it becomes a cage. The drifter tells himself, I am lazy, I am inconsistent, I always quit, and because the subconscious obeys repetition without question, he lives as the very thing he declares. He does not see that he is programming himself with every word. He speaks weakness, so he lives weak. He calls himself undisciplined, so his mind shuts down when discipline is required. He brands himself with smallness, and the world reflects it back. But the sovereign knows the mind does not resist identity, it obeys it. So he writes a new script. He says, I am disciplined, I am relentless, I am the man who executes regardless of mood. And he repeats this not once, but daily, not softly, but with fire, until the subconscious burns away the old label and begins to build action that matches the new one. Say it aloud. I am disciplined, I am consistent, I do not miss. Repeat it until the words feel natural, until your body moves before your excuses arrive, until your entire life reflects the script. Consider Henry Ford, mocked as ignorant, dismissed as uneducated, yet he declared himself a builder, a visionary, and the world came to know him as exactly that. Consider Lincoln, ridiculed as a failure, yet he declared himself a servant of purpose, and the identity carried him through countless defeats until destiny crowned him. Consider Buffett, known for patience and precision because that is the identity he chose, an investor unmoved by panic, a mind unshaken by noise. He repeats the story of discipline, and the world repeats it back to him. Understand this: Laziness is nothing but a false identity spoken too long. Change the script and the life changes. The drifter clings to the label of failure, repeating it until it becomes prophecy. The sovereign burns the label and writes his own, repeating it until the world has no choice but to reflect it. Identity is law. You cannot outwork the story you tell yourself, but you can rewrite it, and when you do, discipline ceases to be effort, it becomes instinct.